To be specific, the SEC said Ripple raised over $1.3 billion by selling XRP without following proper securities laws. That's a huge accusation. People think Ripple created XRP and that they own it and run the whole show, but the reality is a little more complex. So here's the question that's been floating around for years. Is Ripple XRP even decentralized? And if it's not, does that mean it's worthless? Or is XRP actually one of the most useful cryptos out there right now? Because let's be real, some people love XRP. They think it's the future of global payments. Banks use it, institutions love it, and it's fast as hell. But others, they say it's a scam, totally centralized, and the company behind it, Ripple Labs, is basically just a crypto version of a bank. And then there's that whole drama with the SEC, which caused chaos for XRP holders and scared off a lot of investors. But now in 2025, Ripple's still here, still building, still expanding. So today we're gonna break it all down. What is Ripple and XRP really? How does it work? Why do people say it's centralized, and are they right? And even if it's centralized, does that actually matter? Plus, I'll walk you through what Ripple's been doing over the past few years, some of its latest moves, and what the future looks like. Because trust me, there's a lot going on behind the scenes. All right, before we get into the controversies and the centralization debate, we need to clear up one common confusion. Ripple and XRP are not the same thing. Ripple is a company, a real one, with offices, a CEO, engineers, lawyers, and actual products. It was founded in 2012 with one mission: to upgrade the global payment system. Think of it this way. Ripple wants to do for international money transfers what email did for communication: fast, cheap, and smooth. Now, XRP is a cryptocurrency. It's the token that runs on something called the XRP ledger, which is an open source blockchain network. Ripple uses XRP in some of its products, especially for global payments. But Ripple does not own XRP. They didn't invent it out of thin air, and they don't control the network behind it. And this is where a lot of confusion comes from. People think Ripple created XRP and that they own it and run the whole show. But the reality is a little more complex. So I'm here to simplify it. Ripple is the company. XRP is a digital asset. And the XRP ledger is the technology that powers it all. Now let's talk about what XRP actually is used for. Its main purpose is to move money fast. And I mean really fast. We're talking about 3 to 5 seconds for a full settlement. That's way quicker than Bitcoin or Ethereum, and definitely faster than sending money through a bank, which can take days, especially across borders. Ripple built something called On-Demand Liquidity, or ODL. This is where XRP steps in. Let's say a bank in the US wants to send money to a bank in Mexico. Normally, they'd need to hold pesos in a Mexican account ahead of time. That ties up capital and costs a lot. With ODL, the US dollars are instantly converted into XRP, sent over in seconds, and then converted into pesos on the other end. All done automatically. And here's the best part. XRP is not sitting around in anyone's wallet during this. It just moves through the system in real time and gets converted. No need for the banks to hold it. So XRP isn't trying to be the next Bitcoin. It's not meant for buying pizza or tipping streamers. It's built for banks, payment providers, and financial institutions that want to move value across borders without delays, high fees, or middlemen. It's working in the background, powering transactions that most people don't even notice. So once again, Ripple is the company building financial infrastructure. XRP is the digital asset used to move money quickly and cheaply. And the XRP ledger is the decentralized blockchain that makes it all happen. So let's rewind a bit. Ripple's story actually starts way back in the early days of crypto, even before Bitcoin was popular. The original idea behind Ripple wasn't about replacing banks. It was about working with them to make payments faster and more efficient. In 2012, the company we know today as Ripple was originally called OpenCoin. It was founded by Chris Larsen and Jed McCaleb. Yeah, the same Jed McCaleb who later went on to co-found Stellar. This vision was simple: build a global payment system that could move money like information moves online, fast, direct, and without all the friction of traditional banking systems. In 2013, OpenCoin rebranded to Ripple Labs and officially launched the XRP ledger. Now, here's the interesting part. XRP, the token, was created before Ripple became a company. It wasn't launched through an ICO. Instead, 100 billion XRP were pre-mined at the start, and a large chunk of it was gifted to Ripple Labs by the creators of the ledger. That move still causes controversy to this day because Ripple ended up holding a huge amount of XRP. We'll talk more about that later when we get into decentralization. But back to the timeline. Over the next few years, Ripple focused hard on building real partnerships. They weren't out chasing retail hype or trying to pump the coin. They were knocking on the doors of banks and payment providers, and it started working. Big names like Santander, SBI, American Express, and Standard Chartered started testing or using Ripple's technology. Not all of them were using XRP, but they were at least tapping into RippleNet, the network Ripple built for global payments. Ripple also rolled out something called xCurrent, a software product for messaging between banks, and xRapid, which used XRP to provide liquidity for cross-border transactions. Eventually, these were all merged under the RippleNet umbrella. Then came On-Demand Liquidity, which we talked about earlier. That became Ripple's core use case, moving money instantly across borders using XRP as a bridge asset. By 2018 and 2019, Ripple had already built a strong name in the institutional space. They weren't just a crypto project anymore. They were one of the few trying to work directly with banks and regulators. But then the SEC came knocking. In December 2020, the United States Securities and Exchange Commission filed a lawsuit against Ripple, claiming XRP was an unregistered security. That lawsuit changed everything. Exchanges delisted XRP, investors panicked, and the price tanked. We'll go deep into the lawsuit next because it's a big deal, not just for Ripple, but for the entire crypto industry. But before we jump into that legal mess, here's the key takeaway so far. Ripple is not some random token with no purpose. It has a real history. It was built to solve a real problem. And over the past decade, it's been one of the few crypto projects focused on working with the financial world instead of fighting against it. All right, now let's talk about the elephant in the room, the lawsuit. In December 2020, as I mentioned, out of nowhere, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission dropped a bomb on Ripple. They filed a lawsuit claiming that Ripple had sold unregistered securities in the form of XRP. To be specific, the SEC said Ripple raised over $1.3 billion by selling XRP without following proper securities laws. That's a huge accusation. And what made it even crazier was that XRP had been around for years at that point, right? It wasn't some new token popping up in the middle of a bull run. Ripple had been building for almost a decade, and now suddenly it was being accused of breaking the law all along. The crypto world went into panic mode. Within days, major exchanges in the US like Coinbase, Kraken, and Binance US delisted XRP or suspended trading. The price of XRP crashed. Retail investors were furious. Ripple's reputation took a hit, especially in the United States. But Ripple didn't back down. From the beginning, they made it clear they were ready to fight. Ripple's CEO, Brad Garlinghouse, and executive chairman Chris Larsen both denied the SEC's claims. They argued that XRP is not a security and never was. One of Ripple's main points was that XRP is a utility token used for real transactions. It wasn't sold as an investment contract, and it doesn't give holders any ownership or voting rights in the company. The case dragged on for years. But in July 2023, Ripple scored a partial win. A U.S. judge ruled that XRP is not a security when sold on public exchanges to retail buyers. And that was huge. It meant that most XRP holders, regular people like you and me, didn't buy a security. That gave XRP some breathing room. And right after the ruling, a bunch of exchanges relisted XRP again. Now, the case wasn't fully over. There were still questions about institutional sales and whether Ripple followed the right procedures there. But this ruling gave Ripple momentum. It also sent a message to regulators. Crypto isn't so black and white. As of now, in 2025, the legal battle is still winding down. Ripple's legal team has been negotiating terms, and the outcome will probably shape how future crypto projects are regulated in the US. So why does this lawsuit matter? Because it's not just about Ripple, it's about how crypto is treated by governments, whether digital assets are concerned currencies, securities, or something else entirely. And Ripple's case was the first major legal fight where a crypto company stood its ground and said, no, we're not going to just pay a fine and walk away. It shook the entire industry. And whether you love XRP or not, this case played a huge role in shaping crypto regulation in the US. All right, now let's get into the juicy part. One of the biggest criticisms against Ripple and XRP is that they're not truly decentralized. And in the crypto world, that's kind of a big deal. So let's unpack it all. When people think of decentralization, they think of Bitcoin. No central authority, no CEO, no company behind it, right? Just a network of nodes and miners spread all over the world. With Ripple, it's different. First, there's Ripple Labs, an actual company. It plays a major role in developing the XRP ecosystem, and for a long time, it held a massive amount of XRP tokens. At one point, Ripple controlled more than 50% of the total XRP supply. Now, to be fair, most of those tokens are locked in escrow accounts. Ripple can only release a set amount each month. But still, the fact that a single company owns such a big chunk of the supply makes a lot of people uncomfortable. Then there is the validator system. The XRP ledger doesn't use proof of work like Bitcoin or proof of stake like Ethereum. Instead, it uses something called a consensus protocol where trusted validators agree on transactions. But here's the catch. Ripple originally picked most of those validators. They control what's called the unique node list, or UNL, which is basically a recommended list of who gets to validate transactions. So critics argue that this setup gives Ripple way too much influence, even if the network is technically open source. If Ripple decides who's on the list, they kind of run the show, right? Ripple, of course, denies this. They say the XRP ledger is becoming more decentralized over time. They point out that many validators on the network today are independent and not affiliated with Ripple at all. They've even encouraged more community-run validators to join the list, but still, the perception sticks. People see Ripple as a central brain behind the operation, and that's a problem in a world that values decentralization. Now, here's the important question. Does it really matter? If XRP is solving a real problem, cross-border payments, and doing it faster and cheaper than anything else, do we care if it's not as decentralized as Bitcoin? Some people say yes. They believe decentralization is the whole point of crypto. Without it, you're just rebuilding the old financial system with new tools. Others say no. They argue that not every crypto needs to be fully decentralized. Sometimes a bit of structure and leadership actually helps adoption and development, especially when you're dealing with banks and governments, like all the time. So the decentralization debate is real, but it's not black and white. Because in crypto, we love to throw around the word decentralization like it's the ultimate badge of honor. And in a lot of cases, it is. Decentralization means no single point of failure. No government or company can shut things down. It gives power back to the users. That's the dream, right? But let's be honest, not every crypto project needs to be as decentralized as Bitcoin to have value. Bitcoin was built to be a currency outside the control of banks and governments. Total decentralization is the whole point. Ripple, on the other hand, is trying to work with banks, not replace them. Its goal is to upgrade the system, not blow it up. So if Ripple has a company behind it, and if XRP works better because of that structure, maybe that's not such a bad thing. In fact, in some ways, having a company like Ripple Labs behind the technology has helped push adoption forward. And that's what we want. We want adoption to move forward. Banks don't want to deal with an anonymous group of developers. They want real people, legal contracts, and support. Ripple gives them that. And even though XRP might not be the most decentralized asset out there, it's still transparent. It's still secure and fast. It solves a real-world problem, cross-border payments, that very few cryptocurrencies can. So yeah, decentralization is important, but use case and utility, they matter too. If XRP can help move billions of dollars across the globe instantly, cut costs for financial institutions, and improve access to financial services in developing countries, then it's doing something valuable, even if it doesn't meet some crypto purists' definition of decentralization. And let's be real, a lot of tokens that claim to be decentralized aren't truly decentralized either. There's usually a core team. There's usually someone with more power than the rest. So maybe the better question is, what problem is XRP solving, and is it doing it well? If the answer is yes, then it probably still has a place in the future of crypto, whether it's fully decentralized or not. All right, so while the SEC case was dragging on in the background, Ripple didn't just sit around waiting. They kept building. They kept expanding, and they made some pretty big moves. One of the biggest areas Ripple focused on was global partnerships. Ripple started working with central banks on CBDC pilots. That's central bank digital currencies. Countries like Bhutan and Palau partnered with Ripple to explore digital currency infrastructure using the XRP ledger as the backbone. That's a huge sign of trust. Think about it. Governments don't just pick random blockchains to experiment with. They want reliability, speed, and support. Ripple checked all those boxes. In 2023, Ripple made a bold acquisition. They bought Medaco, a Swiss-based digital asset custody provider. Let me tell you why that matters. Because it shows that Ripple isn't just thinking about payments. They're thinking about infrastructure, the tools and platforms that big institutions will need to manage digital assets securely. Ripple also kept expanding into Asia, the Middle East, and Latin America. These are regions where cross-border payments are expensive and slow, exactly the problem Ripple is built to solve. In those places, RippleNet and On-Demand Liquidity started gaining traction, with more financial institutions signing on to use XRP as a bridge currency. And here's something else that flew under the radar. Ripple launched its Liquidity Hub, a product that lets businesses source liquidity from multiple places, including XRP, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and fiat. That means Ripple is thinking beyond just XRP. They're building tools that help companies access crypto liquidity more broadly, which could play a big role in future adoption. Also, remember how XRP got delisted from major US exchanges after the SEC lawsuit? Well, after that partial court victory in 2023, XRP started making a comeback. Coinbase relisted it, Kraken bought it back, and investors started paying attention again. But it didn't stop there. Ripple recently filed a joint motion with the SEC to reduce its $125 million penalty and remove the ban on institutional XRP sales, a strong sign that both sides might be preparing for a resolution. And there's a huge legal milestone coming soon. By August 15th, Ripple and the SEC are expected to submit a joint status report. If the SEC drops its appeal, this could mark the official end of the case, and XRP could be finally cleared for US trading across the board. At the same time, some major asset managers like Wisdom Tree, Bitwise, 21 Shares, and Canary Capital have filed for spot XRP ETFs. If approved, that would be a game changer. Institutions could finally gain exposure to XRP directly, and some analysts are calling for a price surge to anywhere between $10 and $30 if that happens. And get this, There's even talk of Ripple pursuing a US banking charter that would take Ripple from being a cross-border payment network to a regulated financial powerhouse, right inside the traditional banking system. Meanwhile, online sentiment has been buzzing. Reddit chattered focused on July 24th as a potential turning point when the SEC held a closed-door meeting. Rumors spread that the agency might drop the case entirely, which would be massive. So even while fighting a legal war, Ripple kept growing, kept launching products, and kept signing deals. And now, with the lawsuit possibly nearing its end, ETF filings on the table, and institutional momentum building, the bottom line is this: Ripple is not just surviving, it's evolving. And now the real question is, what's next? Ripple's not just trying to survive the crypto chaos anymore. It's looking to dominate, and the company isn't shy about where it wants to go next. From expanding into Europe to working with central banks to launching stablecoin services, Ripple is building a serious playbook for long-term growth. Let's break down what's ahead. First, the big headline. Ripple aims to launch crypto and stablecoin services across the entire European Union. Look, this is massive. The EU is one of the most tightly regulated regions when it comes to finance, where compliance is everything. And Europe is rolling out its new crypto regulation framework, MiCA, the Markets in Crypto Assets Regulation. This means that starting in 2024 and beyond, any crypto company that wants to operate across Europe needs to meet very strict standards on transparency, security, and consumer protection. Ripple already operates within those lines, and by aiming to roll out stablecoin services, they're signaling a pivot toward becoming a crypto-native alternative to traditional payment providers. Stablecoins are a big deal because they bridge the gap between crypto and traditional finance. If Ripple offers its own stablecoin or builds tools to support others, it could become a key player in remittance services, payroll systems, and cross-border settlements, all in a regulated, compliant way. This move would also take Ripple beyond just XRP and show investors that the company has multiple revenue streams, not just one token. Now, aside from the EU push, Ripple has even more plans in motion. They're investing heavily in CBDC infrastructure. The goal here is to keep central banks issue their own digital currencies on top of the XRP ledger. This isn't just talk. They're already working with countries like Palau, Bhutan, and others to pilot these projects. If Ripple becomes the go-to technology provider for digital currencies issued by central banks, that's game over in terms of global relevance. It would give Ripple influence over the future of money itself, especially in smaller or emerging economies. And let's not forget Ripple's Liquidity Hub. This product is designed to help businesses tap into crypto liquidity from multiple sources, including XRP, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and fiat. It's kind of like a one-stop shop for accessing and managing liquidity across multiple assets. That's a smart move. It keeps Ripple flexible and not overly reliant on XRP alone, which is great for business and for investor confidence. Then there's XRP Ledger itself. Ripple has been supporting development proposals like hooks, which would bring smart contract functionality to the XRP Ledger. That means developers could launch a decentralized application, automate transactions, and create more complex financial tools, all without needing Ethereum or Solana. In addition, Ripple has explored side chains that are Ethereum compatible. That opens the door for DeFi apps to connect with the XRP ecosystem without changing their code base. And there's still talk of potential Ripple IPO in the future. Now that much of the legal uncertainty has been cleared up after their partial victory in the SEC case, going public could be on the table. An IPO would bring in a wave of institutional attention and potentially make Ripple one of the first crypto-native companies to be listed on a traditional stock exchange. That would be huge, not just for Ripple, but for the crypto legitimacy as a whole. So let's recap what all of this means. Ripple isn't just holding onto XRP and hoping it pumps again. They're building infrastructure. They're working with governments. They're expanding into regulated markets like the EU. And they're preparing for a world where crypto is a core part of everyday finance. Whether it's through stablecoins, CBDCs, or the Liquidity Hub, Ripple is clearly planning to be a major infrastructure provider for the future of digital money. This is no longer just about XRP as a token. This is about Ripple as a company positioning itself at the center of global finance. After everything we've gone through, the history, the technology, the lawsuit, the decentralization debate, and Ripple's global expansion, the big question is XRP still worth it in 2025? The answer depends on what kind of investor or believer you are. If you're in crypto purely for decentralization, if you're all about cutting out the middlemen and escaping traditional finance, then XRP probably still feels a little too corporate, a little too close to the system it claims to fix. And, that's fair. But if you care about real-world adoption, fast transaction speed, low fees, and serious partnerships with financial institutions and governments, then XRP is still one of the most useful assets in this space. We're not talking about promises anymore. Ripple is already doing what a lot of crypto projects only talk about. They've got deals with central banks, they've launched payment corridors around the world, they're expanding into Europe under strict regulatory rules, and they're laying the groundwork for a stablecoin ecosystem that could actually work in real business environments. That's not hype, that's execution. And as for XRP, the token itself, it's still the heart of Ripple's payment system. It's fast, it's cheap, it's battle tested, and with legal clarity improving, it has room to grow again, especially now that it's back on US exchanges. Of course, nothing is guaranteed. Regulations could still shift, competition could increase, and Ripple will have to prove it can scale beyond just one or two core products. But right now, in 2025, XRP is still very much in the game. It's not the flashiest coin out there, but it might just be one of the most solid bets for long-term infrastructure in the crypto space. So if you believe in blockchain solving real financial problems, not just fueling meme coins or DeFi experiments, XRP might still deserve a spot on your radar. The future of money is changing. Ripple wants to be a part of that change. Now the question is, will XRP ride that wave, or will something else take the lead? Only time will tell. If you made it this far, seriously, you're a legend. I put a lot of time into breaking this all down so you don't have to scroll through dozens of news articles and Reddit threads just to figure out what's going on with XRP. If you found this video valuable, do me a favor, smash that like button. It helps way more than you think and tells the algorithm that people actually want thoughtful crypto content, not just hype and predictions. Also, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the next deep dive. We've got more episodes coming, everything from smart contract platforms to CBDCs to crypto regulation and hidden gems that you might have overlooked. If you've got thoughts on Ripple, XRP, or anything we've covered, drop a comment below. Do you think XRP still has room to grow? Do you care if it's decentralized or not? Or are you completely out on Ripple and looking somewhere else? Let's talk about it. Leave a comment. I read every single comment and I'll be responding to as many as I can. And hey, if you want to support the channel directly, share this video with a friend who's still wondering whether XRP is still worth their time or not, or post it in your crypto group chat if you got one. Thanks again for hanging out with me today. This is Delshot signing off. Stay sharp, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next one.